Shalonda Smith is an international board certified lactation consultant with a 20-year career in the maternal child health field. She specializes in postpartum care and has a strong background in developmental disabilities programs. Shalonda is a graduate of the University of South Carolina, Aiken, and holds a Master of Science in Health Education from Walden University. She excels in program design, implementation, evaluation, and grant management and policy development. Please help me in joining Shalonda Smith as our moderator as she introduces our phenomenal speakers for our panels. Welcome in, Shalonda.
Thank you, Chantel. And as we begin our panel this afternoon, I just want to introduce everyone out there to this amazing lineup that we have. So first we have Shakenya Birch-Oliver, who is a licensed professional counselor in Peachtree Corners, Georgia. She primarily works with young Black professionals who have experienced relational trauma and specializes in reproductive and fertility-related concerns. Shakenya is a member of Postpartum Support International and the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. Her passion lies in helping minorities face birthing and reproductive-related challenges. Next, we have Marquita White. Marquita White is the founding executive director of Mommies in the D, a nonprofit organization empowering young mothers in the Detroit area. With a background in education and nonprofit leadership, Marquita advances for maternal health justice and strives for equitable solutions to support youth. She is closely affiliated with Reaching Our Sisters everywhere. Those of you in the Atlanta area, I know you know Rose, and she aims to enhance her maternal health education as an IBCLC. Lakeisha Headley is the owner of Georgia Women's Health Consultants, providing personalized and compassionate care to women during pregnancy, childbirth, and beyond. As a pre-med student, okay, Lakeisha, she is working towards becoming an OBGYN, okay? She combines her birth professional experience with medical training to deliver comprehensive care. Lakeisha's dedication to women's health is a valuable asset to her clients as well as community. And finally, we have Sarah Braffman. Sarah is the National Policy Director at A Better Balance, leading the organization's federal and state policy agenda. She focuses on developing anti-discrimination protections for pregnant, lactating, caregiving individuals, as well as advocating for fair scheduling, paid leave, and paid sick time. Sarah emphasizes centering the voices of Black, pregnant, and postpartum people in advancing workplace protections. So thank you all for being with us this afternoon, and we will begin our discussion this afternoon with Shakenya. Shakenya, tell us, what is relational trauma and how can it impact the birthing process?
Relational trauma is really just that disruption of a child's sense of safety, sense of being loved within that family dynamic. And so that's the most basic way. There's definitely different layers to it, but at the root of it, it's just that disruption of a sense of safety. And so that can look like physical, that can be verbal, that can be sexual. And the most common is emotional abuse and neglect. And that's what a lot of the clients I see, they've maybe dealt with some of each, but majority of them have in common that they've all experienced some form of emotional either abuse or neglect, most often neglect.
Thank you, Shakenya. So tell us more about some of the common issues that present as a result of relational trauma.
And can you hear me better? I saw some people talking about the volume, so I wanted to make sure. Okay, great. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. What are common issues that may present as a result of relational trauma?
So certain issues that may, the most common thing that I see is a lot of grief. And I know that sounds crazy is like grief. Out of all the things that people present with, grief is the biggest thing. I always tell my clients from the first beginning that trauma work is grief work, because there's grief over who I felt like I should have become, I could have become. There's grief around that relationship that now I have to maybe cut ties with, or it's not necessarily what everybody else has experienced in their life. Who would I have been if I had not experienced this thing that happened to me? And so that is the most common thing I see. And so a lot of those that kind of shows up into the work that we do. So it's a lot of forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others. In the most, so that is the most broad. And so other things that can kind of come up is hypervigilance, anxiety, depression, things of that nature. And so specifically as it relates to individuals who may be trying to go through the birthing route, there is a lot of anxiety around that relationship. What type of mother or father will I be because of my background? I didn't have a blueprint on how to create or cultivate healthy relationships and healthy dynamics. And so I see a lot of that, a lot of anxiety around just doing life. Things that maybe should be these joyful times, are whether it's relationships in general, creating relationships with others, are filled with a lot of anxiety and worry.
Thank you, Shakia. Don't go anywhere. From that note, I'd really like to jump over to the stunning Lakeisha. She is giving off Faith Evans vibes this morning. Lakeisha, tell us a little bit about your work with Georgia Women's Health Consultants, because we know you do work as it relates to trauma.
Yes, thank you so much. So at Georgia Women Health Consultants, we specialize in supporting women through pregnancy, childbirth, and into motherhood. We tell every client it's your body, your birth, and your way. One of the things that we like to do is to ensure that our clients are not just supported physically and emotionally, but also that their mental health is taken care of. And we do that by forming partnerships with the community through therapy, community support groups that we have available, and any other thing that we can find that's going to suit the needs of our clients and their families.
Thank you. Do you have some specific data that you could share with us as it relates to trauma and birth?
Yes, absolutely. So most of my clients have suffered some form of trauma. We know that 80% of Black women experience some form of trauma in their life. That can be emotional trauma, physical trauma, sexual trauma. And we are more than 35% more likely than white women to suffer some form of trauma in our lifetime. Now, we know that with trauma, the goal that we want is to make sure that we receive mental health support, and only 7% of Black women seek treatment for their mental health when they've suffered some form of trauma in their lifetime. And I'm so happy to be a part of this panel today, and also this particular webinar, because there's so many different resources that are available to us that you should pass on to your sisters, your mothers, anyone out there who have suffered some form of trauma, so that they can get the help that they need. And, when we're talking about trauma, I deal a lot with birth, and 33% of women are going to experience some form of birth trauma. Our goal at Georgia Women's Health Consultants is to help our clients build a plan on different ways to help prevent that birth trauma from happening.
Thank you, Lakeisha. And now moving over to Marquita. Marquita, tell us a little bit. I'm particularly interested because I know you do a lot of work with the specialized population and also trauma. So tell us a little bit about some significant factors that can impact young mothers as it relates to mental health.
Yes, so we work specifically with young parents, 14 to 22 years old, and we have seen three big significant differences that can attribute to their issues with lactation or just having an understanding about breastfeeding. So the first is just issues with lactation. Now, it's not so much that mothers are not breastfeeding when they are discharged from the hospital, but continuing to breastfeed is really the biggest issues. In Michigan, we're seeing a 60% drop from the second month of breastfeeding, or even the sixth month of breastfeeding, almost non-existent because of issues with latching on, and concerns about the infant's weight. Now, this can definitely go into how their village might support them as far as breastfeeding, and even what we're seeing is that they might get stressed because of what bias might be, or what an opinion might be. So if the birth weight is not matching what it should be, they might get discouraged and they might not understand where to find the support that they need, or they might be scared. And so Mommy's in the D really tries to act as a buffer in that, and introduce them to the partners that can help them, such as IBCOCs, of course, or even peer specialists in their hospitals. We also see that if it loses the easiness or the convenience, this is something that is concerning to a mom. And so they already feel like they have a target on their backs. And so they want to make sure that they are finding the best solution that might please their village, which is sometimes formula, but we all know that that's not true, especially with formula shortages, especially during COVID, showing us that breastfeeding is the best option. Second, the unsupportive work policies and lack of parental leave. A lot of our 14 to 22-year-old mothers are working either at factories or definitely fast food restaurants, places where the Pump Act might not have a significant impact on how they have to show up. And so having having breastfeeding spaces that are making it capable for the mothers to breastfeed besides bathrooms, or even in their cars, is so important. And so this could also cause them trauma to have an option available, but not really have a ability to do what they have been asked to do, like breastfeed. They can't breastfeed in a McDonald's driveway, And lastly, misalignment to cultural norms and lack of family support. As I said before, if a bias is preventing the mother from getting to their own goals of breastfeeding, then sometimes generationally, they might not come from a family that has breastfed, or they might not come from a community that is uplifting breastfeeding. And so Mommies in the D really has been doing a lot of work to highlight breastfeeding, offering Milky Mama Awards to mothers that have breastfed, or even providing support when it comes to making sure that breast milk is provided for them, or breast pumps are provided for them, or even HACAs are provided if that is an option. And also educating their families. We have fathers that are now the biggest advocates for breastfeeding, and we also educate the grandparents. We will send our parents and especially our fathers to reaching our brothers everywhere to make sure that they are understanding the resources, or even Queen Circle with roles. But we also have communities in Detroit where we are really making sure that education is something that is available, and it's not just the end all be all for their mental health, but it is adding to the solutions that could possibly be causing stress.
Thank you so much, Marquita. And on that note, I'd like to transition just a little bit, because you brought up a very key word, which was policy. And that's where I really want to transition a little bit to Sarah and just hear more from her in regards to, what are some of the national workplace rights, and how do those national workplace rights support Black maternal mental health? Sarah?
Thank you so much, Londa, and it's so great to be here with you all. I'm so glad that the workplace has already been raised as an issue around where we need more support, because oftentimes, like Marquisha was saying, we don't have enough support in the workplace. That postpartum people are often, if they don't have paid leave, go back to work within days or weeks of giving birth. And we just don't have, as many folks know, a national paid leave policy in this country right now. And, you know, there are millions of people who are struggling to both maintain their health, support their babies, and earn a paycheck for their families. And we have a ways to go, but the good news is that there are two new federal laws apply nationwide, including in Georgia, that just went into effect. One is called the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, and one is called the Pump for Nursing Mothers Act. And the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act really was born out of a problem that we were seeing over and over, which is that pregnant and postpartum people often need modest changes at work to stay healthy and to stay working. And they were being forced out of work because they needed those changes, or forced to not ask for those changes at all because there was no right to ask for these changes. And what the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act does is to say that you can get reasonable accommodations at work so long as those don't cause undue hardship on an employer. And what that means is they're really difficult or really expensive. And it's a pretty high bar that employers have to meet around undue hardship. But it's called the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, but what's really important to know is that it applies to pregnancy, it applies to childbirth, and it applies to related medical conditions, which means postpartum depression, recovery from childbirth. And you don't need to have a disability in order to get these accommodations. It used to be that in order to get accommodations, you needed to have a legally recognized disability. You don't need to have that anymore in order to get that. And the scope of these accommodations is really broad. It can include everything from temporary transfer, time off to attend mental health appointments without penalty. It can include time off for postpartum depression if needed. It can include changes in your job duty, flexible scheduling if needed. And it also includes lactation, right? Lactation is a related medical condition. You can get accommodations for lactation related needs. And the PUMP Act is also a new lactation law. It covers millions of postpartum people, almost everyone in this country. And it provides a right to break time and a functional, reasonable lactation space. It cannot be a bathroom. You cannot be forced to pump in your car. It has to be functional, a place to sit, a surface on which to put a pump. And what's important about both of these laws is that there are really strong anti-retaliation provisions, meaning you can't be penalized for asking for the accommodation or using the accommodation. And what's so important about that is, we did a listening session with the Black Mamas Matter Alliance a couple years ago. And what we were hearing was that people were just fearful about asking for their needs because of retaliation, because of predetermined prejudice and racism that is so long-standingly held around Black people in the workplace, that people were just fearful for even asking. And what these laws do is to say, no, you are protected even for asking for them, because we need a culture shift in our society. And with these laws, we really hope that that culture shift comes about.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We're going to transition a little bit to some of the questions in the chat. However, while we're transitioning to some of those, I want you all to start thinking about, as it relates to the specific work that you specialize in, what's some of the strategies that could assist some of the families that you support. So transitioning now to one question, we'll come back to the strategies piece, but transitioning to a question in the chat, do you feel there are more there's more grief due to COVID, and should that be highlighted more in our community? What's your thoughts? Let's start with you, Shakenya.
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you were all were talking about different policies and that support and how some of these policies are helping build support, I think about the grief aspect of that relational trauma, and we have this disruption with your primary like family. Maybe I don't have as much support because it's not safe to depend on these people, or maybe I'm just at a place where I don't trust my ability to depend, and so I don't have maybe those that family support that I may need. And then you think about friendships, people who have experienced relational trauma. It's hard to make friends because if I can't trust my primary caregivers, the people who brought me into this world, it makes it very difficult for me to trust other people outside of that. And so building relationships is a lot of the work that we do because it's important. And so you talked about COVID, and yeah, I saw a lot of that during COVID, where the increase in hopelessness and depression, and having to really get creative in how to cultivate relationships when it's already tough and you throw a pandemic in the mix, and it's very difficult. So when you think about birthing, and I'm bringing a baby into the world now, and I don't have family, I don't trust people, just having those supports in place is going to be super important. So, and we can talk more about those strategies next time. I mean, in the other question.
Thank you so much, Shakenya. I'd really like to hear from you as well, Marquita, particularly with your expertise with young families, young parents. You know, do you feel that, you know, due to COVID, you know, there's an increased need for grief counseling? The floor is yours.
Yes, for sure. And the biggest thing is that, you know, as adults, we're trying to figure out their lives. You know, how often do we ask ourselves how were young people, and not only just young people, but young marginalized people uh, dealing with COVID? We had young mothers who had to be unhoused because their parents passed away from COVID. You know, we had mothers that went through additional stressors because now the same issues that were coming up, like now they're magnified because now I'm in the house with 9 people. And the grief of understanding that my grandmother or my auntie or my uncle is passing away, and I still have to have this child, the father of my child has passed away, and I still have to deliver, or I can't even go into the hospital room with my mother because she has to be quarantined, but I have this newborn and there's nowhere to go. That causes so much of an overwhelming overwhelming reaction to what a young parent can experience. And they already have so many stressors to deal with because they are just trying to not take up so much space. So it's so important to have wrapped our arms around them when we did, especially while the world was taking a pause and trying to understand Zoom for the first time or Facebook Messenger. Most of our meetings, especially mental health check-ins, were happening through Facebook Messenger. So being flexible with the moms and meeting them where they were, even if it meant we're going outside with our mask on, giving them self-care products or giving them hygiene products, or we're having a play date in the park, like acting instantly to show them that we are community and we're in this together was so important to kind of combat some of that overwhelming feeling that we are in this together, but like you all are in a house full of 10 people, you know, like, and they're passing away. And, you know, just making sure that we really highlighted that they have feelings too. They are bringing in children into this world too. And we are evolving as a people together and trying to figure out what does this look like, even post-pandemic now.
Thank you so much, Lakita. That was awesome. Lakeisha, tell us a little bit in your work, you know, what's some of your thoughts? And then also, you know, share with us a little bit of, you know, your agency, Georgia Health Consultants, how you directly support some of that trauma and that grief and healing work.
Yeah, thank you. You know, with the grief aspect, it's so hard to, now that we're out of being at home all the time, is to find people that you do trust. And I let my clients know that it's important to find your A person, your B person, and your C person. And that A person is someone that allows you to express yourself freely. They don't provide judgment, and you can share anything with them because they provide that space for you. Your B person is like, okay, well, I do have some trust with you, but there are a few things that I don't want to share because my A person is that person for me. And then your C person is a person that, while I'm on my journey to motherhood, whether I'm pregnant or I'm about to deliver, I'm not really going to share too many details with you because you may not necessarily understand or hold that space for me. But in other aspects of my life, I know that I can talk to you about those things. So that is something that I talk to my clients about. Other things that we use is, we call it the BBCM approach, and that is focusing on your birth environment, your birth team, communication, and mental health. So with your birth environment, it's important to ensure that you feel comfortable and safe giving birth in that environment. So if you have some hesitations, you're like, I don't want to go to the hospital at all, I'm afraid that me or my baby, or maybe both of us, we won't come home. And so it's important to do research, look at reviews, go to these places and find maybe a birth center. Maybe you're eligible to birth at home, so you want to look for a midwife. And that's what you should look for when you're talking about your birth environment. Are they going to allow you to have your candles and listen to your music? Can you walk around and move around freely? The other thing is your birth team. You want to make sure that your team, whether it's your midwife, your doctor, your doula, that they all have a trauma-sensitive approach, and they help you to navigate through your triggers in a healthy way. And they also respect your values and your preferences. With communication, this sometimes is one of the harder pieces for my clients because they're not sure on how to advocate for themselves and for their baby. So we go through some different scenarios to help provide them with some examples. Make sure that you define your boundaries and your consent, and set those expectations on what's appropriate for you and what you're not going to deal with. The last thing is mental health. Make sure that you're doing your self-care activities. You are connecting with others with similar experiences through support groups, and also creating a trauma-informed birth and postpartum plan. Those are very important. A lot of time we just focus on the birth, but they're not trauma sensitive. And then also we don't focus on what's going to take place after the baby comes home. So you also would need to focus on a trauma sensitive postpartum plan. And of course, there are tons of resources that are out there and are available. And I believe after today's session, you guys will receive our presentations that we have. And so feel free to take a look at mine, and you'll see tons of resources that are available, which includes the wonderful Postpartum Support International as well.
Thank you, Lakeisha. I appreciate that. Sarah, we had a phenomenal question in the chat in regards to, with Georgia being a at-will state, how do some of these policies cover some of our parents here? And, maybe even share with us, Sarah, some tips in regards to, experiencing retaliation and things of that nature for, some of our workers who are utilizing the policy, utilizing the rights, but they feel they are being retaliated against on their job.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for that question. So first of all, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act and the Pump for Nursing Mothers Act apply to all types of employees. So even if you're an at-will employee, this should apply to you. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act applies to employers with 15 or more employees, similar to the Civil Rights Act federally and similar to the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Pump Act applies to employers of all sizes. So no matter how large or small your employer is, you have the right to break time and space. And again, that space cannot be a bathroom, and you cannot be forced to pump in your car. I saw someone put that in the chat. It is so upsetting. I'm so sorry that happened to you. The hope is that going forward, this will not happen. And so let's talk about what happens if you are retaliated against or if you experience problems. So a better balance. I work on helping to pass the laws, and I have colleagues that are working, attorneys who staff our free legal helpline. Anyone from all around the country can call us with questions about their rights at work, their own particular situation, and we can give them information about how to navigate in the workplace. And that includes if you are having trouble getting accommodations at work or think that you're being retaliated against. And then the important thing to know is that these are laws that are enforceable. And what do I mean by that? Is like policies are only as good as actual, holding employers to account for violations. And so for the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is a federal agency, enforces the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. So if you think your rights have been violated, you can go to the EEOC and file a charge saying that your rights have been violated, and they will investigate that charge, and they will potentially, find that your employer was in violation of the law, and there will be penalties for your employer. They may have to pay you back. They may have to put you back on the job. They may have to, and I saw someone put information about filing a charge with the EEOC in the chat. I'm very grateful for that. And then even if the EEOC doesn't necessarily pursue it, once you file a charge with the EEOC, you can then also bring a case in court as well. So there are multiple ways to get at violations of the law. Now, the PUMP Act is enforced by the U.S. Department of Labor. And I'm sorry, I know it's confusing. We have two laws that are enforced by two different agencies, but the Department of Labor, I want to emphasize this, has started really robustly enforcing the PUMP Act and violations, and they are actually starting to expedite issues when they are called. And so they are, because they know, if you can't pump for a couple of days, that could mean losing your milk supply. That could mean getting mastitis and real issues there. And so if you call the DOL, I know, at least as of now, they are very committed to really trying to get involved and speak to employers and not go through a lengthy investigation process necessarily, but really just try to intervene to get you the support that you need. So I would say the first line is, if you have questions, if you want to talk to someone, pretty quickly, our staff really tries to get back to folks fairly quickly, which can often be an issue for people. And so we can talk with you about your range of rights, about all the information that we can provide you, and then also give you information about these federal agencies that are enforcing these laws. But I really want to emphasize, I don't want folks to feel alone in this. If you work in Georgia, you have real protections now under these federal laws, and you may have additional protections that we can talk to you about under a whole range of other laws as well. And we really want to be a support, because laws are only as, it took 10 years to pass these laws. They're so common sense. It's really wild to think about it, but it's really just the beginning for us, because we need people to know about these laws. We need people to exercise their rights, and we want to help, get the word out about them as far and wide as possible.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I can't express myself how policy is, the foundation of, I'm going to say, so not just so much of our work, but it's just the protection for us as parents, and protection and guidance also for agencies and organizations out there. So thank you so much for sharing that and clarity and providing those resources. With that being said, I'd like to transition to Shakenya to talk to us a little bit more about the importance of having, I'm going to say, like a mental health component to our postpartum care plan that we heard of earlier. So much we're always just so focused on, taking care of the baby as parents. And, there is a time that needs to be set aside for, the birthing parent to take care of themselves, to, have some mental health, I'm going to say, support, or have some parameters in place that will support what they are going through emotionally after giving birth to a child. So talk to us a little bit, if you will, about strategies that can assist birthing parents with who may be experiencing negative consequences as it relates to relational trauma, and just, I'm going to say, general postpartum care. Like, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I loved when Lakeisha was talking about the plans that she incorporates with her clients. And absolutely, that trauma-informed approach is so important. So finding a mental health provider who is trauma-informed, I'm so grateful for PSI for, providing so many trainings to mental health professionals so they can get the knowledge that they need and those statistics and just knowing what's going on out there is so important. And so with the mental health component, it's definitely important for a mama to take care of herself, right? That fourth trimester is still a thing. And having somebody who you can talk to about the changes, whether it's the hormonal changes, which do impact your mind and your mood and all of those things. And so really having a safe space to kind of talk about those things that you might not be able to talk about with your friends and your family because they don't get it. And just having a professional there to lay eyes on you, because it's very common for people to go through postpartum depression or mood and anxiety disorders and not know. They're just not aware. But having somebody who you're checking in with constantly who can kind of lay eyes and say, hey, you were talking about this or you've been discussing this. And when you're in it, it's hard to know. But so having that person is super important. And so they can kind of give you actionable things that you can do to help you. I would say just really.
Thank you, Shakia. And Marquita, if you could tell us maybe just one strategy as it relates to, helping young parents prepare themselves for postpartum, what is one thing you could share with our group today?
I believe that it's really important that we have empathy for young parents' truths. It is okay to say, oh, back in my day, but when we are thinking about postpartum for this new generation, we have to be open to new perspectives, find the common ground with this young parent, and understand that they have the answers to what they are needing. They are just looking for the village. Just like Shakina said, we are the village. We are an addition to what they already have within themselves. We need to let them be able to figure out what their truths are, validate those truths, and uplift those truths because they do know what's best for themselves and their baby. And anytime we are seeing them a little not being at their best selves when we're doing our check-ins, we are immediately taking action from that point to give them the options and letting them choose what the best route is for them. So please validate and have empathy for the young parent's truths. It might not be your truth, but it might be the best truth for that parent. And we have to uplift and trust that they know what's best for themselves and their children.
Thank you, Marquita. Thank you so much. And I feel like that one tip you gave us is no different than any other population that we're working with, right? As far as practicing, I'm going to say active listening, really hearing them and really helping them, I guess, recognize what that answer is and helping them bring it to fruition. So I really appreciate you sharing that piece. So also, if you will, everyone, if we could just do a quick round robin as we begin to wrap this up, and also just give us a quick share as well where we can find more resources, information, or research. And I will begin this one with you, Lakeisha.
Yes, you can find more information about me and some of the services that we provide at Georgia Women's Health Consultants at mybirthmybody.com. So that's where you'll be able to find all the additional resources.
Okay, Sarah.
So we have lots of resources on www.abetterbalance.org. It looks like our website might be down currently for scheduled maintenance, but I'm sure it'll be back very shortly. And there's a few things I want to highlight on that page. So one, of course, is our information about our free legal helpline. Again, it's free, it's confidential. We never ask about immigration status. There's no income cap at all. So really want folks to feel like they can reach out to us. There's also a new Know Your Rights page around these new laws to provide information. There's template accommodation request letters. So if folks feel like they, need a little bit more guidance around how to ask for an accommodation, we want to provide that as a resource. It's easy. You can fill in just what your needs are. And then we also have a resource that we co-created with the Center for Work-Life Law called Talking to Your Boss About Your Pump and Talking to Your Boss About Your Bump. And what these are is they're resources that are meant to help you have conversations with your employer about being pregnant, about postpartum needs, about pumping, and kind of giving tips and tricks about how to have the conversation and what to do if that conversation seems to be going a little bit haywire, and the resources that you can turn to if that conversation is proving to be difficult. So please feel free to check out all of those resources.
Thank you. Shakenya, tell us a little bit about resources and information, how we can learn more from you. And we have a very popular question for you, Shakenya. I have to throw it at you really quickly. But do you see patients virtually, if you could tell us that? And also, what about couples? Do you do couples sessions as well?
I do see clients virtually. I am not working with couples right now. That is something that I want to do in the future, but I like to stay in my lane. And so right now, no, not with the couples. And as far as resources, you could definitely check out our website, trusttochange.com. We're also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Trust the Change. And if you want to find me, I'm at Heal with Ken. And so, yeah, that's how you can kind of learn more. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marquita, what about you? Can you share some resources, information with us, and wrap this up for us?
Yes. So you can follow all of our amazing work with Mommies in the D at www.mommiesinthed.org. I see that someone said that the link that is not my link, but I will make sure that that's posted for you guys. And also, if you would like to see a little bit more about breastfeeding resilience and some of the things that Mommies in the D does to make sure that breastfeeding is uplifted, there is a free CERP opportunity at Great Lakes breastfeeding summit. I believe it's actually a free site where you can watch a training, and we talk a little bit more about the breastfeeding resilience and how we can really make sure that young parents can overcome that gap between hospital discharge breastfeeding versus that first 6 months. So let's make sure that we are being amazing advocates for young parents, and just making sure that we're listening and we're here for it. No matter what age the mother or father is, we are being there for them.
Thank you all so much for being here. Shakenya, Sarah, Marquita, and Lakeisha, thank you for sharing pieces with us today that will help us transform parenting, help us to have more positive parenting experiences as Black parents. We are now about to transition to the next segment of our summit this afternoon. Thank you all so much. Continue to drop your questions in the chat, and we will make sure we get them to our panelists. Thank you.